When we think about a food chain, we usually picture a pyramid, right? You've got this big, wide base, and it gets smaller and smaller as you go up. But what if I told you that sometimes nature just flips that pyramid completely upside down? Yeah, seriously. So let's get into how that's even possible.
And that right there, that's the big puzzle we're going to unpack today. How can the very foundation of an entire ecosystem look smaller than everything it's holding up? It just doesn't seem to make sense. So to figure this out, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to build this thing from the ground up, one piece at a time.
All right, so let's start with that first foundational piece, the simple food chain. It's a concept you've probably heard of before, and really it boils down to just one thing, where the energy is going.
So a food chain, it's basically just a map of who eats who, right? But the really crucial part of this map, the thing you have to pay attention to, are the arrows. They aren't just pointing to the next animal on the menu. Nope, what they're really showing us is the direction that energy is moving through the entire system.
Okay, let's look at a classic example here. It all starts with a producer. In this case, some clover. It's soaking up energy from the sun. Then along comes a primary consumer, a snail, and it eats the clover. Next up, the snail gets eaten by a secondary consumer, this thrush. And finally, at the very top, you've got a tertiary consumer, like a sparrowhawk. See? It's just a simple, straight line of energy flowing from one thing to the next. Okay, that's a simple line. But how do we turn that into a picture? Visualize it. Well, the easiest, most straightforward way is just to count everything up. And when you do that, you get what we call a pyramid of numbers. Now, before we actually build that pyramid, there's one key term you need to know: trophic level. It sounds kind of scientific, but all it really means is an organism's spot in the food chain. So the clover, that's the first trophic level. The snail is on the second, the thrush on the third. You get the idea. It's just the different steps up the ladder.
Okay, so when we stack up these trophic levels with the producers at the bottom, what do we get? We get this perfect, classic pyramid shape. And it totally makes sense, right? You need a ton of clover plants to feed a whole bunch of snails, and those snails can only support a smaller number of thrushes, which in turn only support a handful of sparrowhawks at the very top. It has to be this way, because a lot of energy gets lost at every single step, so the number of organisms has to get smaller as you go up.
So this model, it looks perfect. It's so neat and logical, it feels like it has to be right. But nature, it's messy. It's rarely that simple. And sometimes this neat little pyramid of numbers doesn't just get a bit wobbly, it flips completely upside down.
So let's think about a different scenario, an entirely different ecosystem. This time, at the bottom of the food chain, we don't have thousands of little plants. We have one single massive producer, a giant oak tree. And that one tree provides food for, let's say, a whole army of caterpillars. So think about it for a second. If we're sticking to our rule of just counting the individual organisms, what is that pyramid going to look like? And there it is. Our pyramid is totally broken. The producer level, the very foundation, our single oak tree is now the tiniest bar at the bottom. Right above it, you have this massive bar for the thousands of caterpillars. Then it gets small again for the blue tits that eat them, and even smaller for the hawks at the top. This doesn't look like a pyramid at all. It's more like, a spinning top or something.
And here's why this is a real problem. It's not just that it looks weird. It's that it's completely misleading. This picture makes the single most important part of the entire food chain, that enormous oak tree that's providing all the energy, it makes it look totally insignificant. The visualization itself has failed. It's telling us the wrong story.
So, how do we fix this? Clearly, just counting things doesn't always work. We need a better way to measure what's really going on here. And that solution, that better metric, is something called biomass.
So what is biomass? Well, it's not about counting individuals anymore. It's about weighing them. It's the total mass of all the living stuff at each level. So we're talking about the thousands of kilograms of wood, leaves, and roots in our oak tree versus the, maybe few kilograms of all those caterpillars combined. It's a measure of the total stuff at each step. And this is where you see the huge difference. By the numbers, yeah, it's just one oak tree versus thousands and thousands of caterpillars. But when you look at the biomass, well, the sheer mass of that one tree is absolutely gigantic compared to the teeny tiny total mass of all those insects put together.
So what happens when we rebuild our pyramid, but this time we use biomass instead of numbers? Well, look at that. The problem is solved. The pyramid shape is back. That huge bar at the bottom now correctly shows that the oak tree has the most mass, the most stored energy, and it's supporting a much smaller total mass of caterpillars, which supports an even smaller mass of birds, and so on. Ah, sanity has been restored.
And this really brings us to the main point of all this. While sure, counting can be useful sometimes, it's biomass that gives us the true picture, a much more accurate look at how energy is really structured in an ecosystem.
So why is biomass so much better? It's because it completely gets around that tricky problem of organism size. It doesn't matter if you have one gigantic tree or millions of microscopic plankton. Biomass just measures the actual physical material, the potential energy that's available at each level. And because of that, it almost always gives you that true, proper pyramid shape.
And really, that's the whole key right there. Unlike a pyramid of numbers, which can get totally thrown off by one big producer, a pyramid of biomass is incredibly consistent. It reliably shows you that fundamental rule: energy and mass always decrease as you go up the food chain. So from now on, when you see a simple food web, I want you to think beyond just counting things up. Think about the mass. Think about the weight. Think about the true energy that's actually being represented. And that kind of leads to a final bigger question, doesn't it? If we were to draw a pyramid of biomass for our own human consumption, what would that pyramid shape tell us about our impact, our place in the global ecosystem? Kind of gives you something to chew on, right?